Let's talk about reading the room, because that sounds simple until you realize most of the rules in the room are invisible. Hey, Em.
Hey, Dave.
So let's talk about unwritten rules.
Yes.
So you walk into a room, everyone's laughing. What do you do?
It's interesting because for me, I think because I've got like ADHD and OCD and I'm really good I'm high masking. So reading the room whilst in some areas of the neurodivergent space, reading the room is really challenging. It doesn't come naturally. For me, whilst it maybe doesn't come naturally, it's a learned skill where I'm reading everything. So I'm almost overreading a room rather than just taking a room at face value. What do you do when you walk into a room and everybody's laughing?
Honestly, I probably walk in with a smile
Yeah.
subconsciously, but I'm probably a little bit uncomfortable because it's like, what are they laughing at? I mean, is it this loud shirt they're laughing at? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess it's interesting because as we discussed before this, social rules, nobody writes them down. They're not written anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Nobody teaches them.
Yep.
You don't sit at primary school in prep and they say, and when this happens, we all do this. But everyone seems to notice whenever you miss those social cues,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about before you and I were having a coffee.
Yeah.
So in our house, we play Cards Against Humanity, the kids version. And it's interesting because you have to read other people's sense of humor. I know exactly what my daughter's going to laugh at because we have the same sense of humor. My wife and I have a similar sense of humor, and my son and I don't have the same sense of humor. We do in some areas, but not everywhere. And so it's really interesting to see the way we both try and make each other laugh in those situations. And when he puts down something that he finds funny, when it's a pack of cards and I see the results, generally I know, okay, that's his card and that's my daughter's card and that's his card. And that's only because I can read his reactions to things. I can read my wife's reactions. I can read my daughter's reactions. So I know what they're thinking. But for him, he struggles to read those reactions. So he doesn't know what's going to make us laugh. And sometimes, you know what it's like with kids. They make a joke, you laugh. Even though it mightn't be funny, you laugh. And so we're perpetually giving them the message that if you say these things, yeah, they're funny. Yeah. But there gets to a stage in life where generally the kids learn themselves by being around other kids, those jokes aren't funny. Yeah. And not every adult will laugh at their jokes. So by trial and error, they learn these things, and that's social cues. All the kids in the class are laughing at particular types of things. So if I want to be that funny person, then I will make those same jokes. Yeah. But for a lot of neurodiverse people, that's not a skill. Having the ability to read the room, to see what everyone's thinking about certain tasks and certain activities and certain reactions doesn't exist. Yeah. It's really difficult. The most difficult thing as a parent, and I think I'd say nearly every parent has this, is when your child doesn't have friends. And so one of the biggest things for a lot of neurodiverse people is the ability to insert themselves into a group, into a conversation. So I remember in primary school, we'd get a call from the school saying your son has pushed someone, or they've hit someone, or they've yelled, or something like that. And that's not acceptable. Okay, fair enough. That's not acceptable. I get that. But then we'd drill down a little bit further, and what we would understand is, so there was a group of 3 kids. Our son doesn't know how to just join into the conversation. He doesn't know how to join in making jokes or anything like that. So for him, the easiest thing to do was to get engaged and to get other people interested, was to, if you give them a little push, then, everyone's looking at me, everyone's saying that. And what if that person over there pushed that person and it was funny? He goes, okay, that person pushed that person. Okay, if I do that, that's funny. It's a case of like having a dictionary or an encyclopedia. Yep. And you see something and you go, okay, that person pushed that person, that's funny. You put it in your mental diary. And for the greater society, we see that and we put it in that's a possibly funny situation. That might be funny. We might be able to use that in the future. When all these other rules are true, that's funny. But for a lot of neurodiverse people, you put that into your book under F for funny. If that exact instance was to occur, it's funny.
Yeah.
But by the same token, you don't take into account all the other things that are going on in that space.
Yeah.
It's just you push that person, it's funny. And then say, push that another person and think that it's going to be funny and not understand why it's something wrong.
Yeah.
And so what we've always tried to explain to people is that it's not a case of learning a general rule. If you explain something, you need to explain it really intricately so he understands. But it's only that one exact instance. If there's any modification around that, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So if there's a third person there and someone pushes someone, then that changes the dynamic of everything. If what happens before that changes everything, what happens after that changes everything. What was done, what was said, what was going on. There's so many different social rules that you learn as you grow, as you go through these situations that you put in your mental bank of this is funny, this isn't, this is acceptable, this isn't. But for a lot of neurodiverse people, that bank is enormous because you have to be exact with your definitions. And it's incredibly difficult. Like, I don't know about you, but we will have explained things to our son, even the most simple things like when someone comes to the door, it's natural. Oh, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
And we've discussed this.
Yep.
That's just something that you say.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, sometimes it means something, sometimes it doesn't. But how do you explain that?
Yeah.
How do I explain to him that when I ask Emily, it means something, but when I ask Joe the butcher, it's just a hello? You can't.
Yeah, because these social rules, I guess, or these rooms are contextual, they're environmental, they're cultural. What might be considered acceptable or funny or appropriate in one family or one culture may not in another. It might be considered rude or so. And then you multiply that by however many billions of families and people we have in the world, right? Those social rules become so nuanced that for even a neurotypical brain can sometimes be hard to read because it's not just neurodiverse people that can struggle to read a room. It potentially just takes so much more effort and so much more cataloging and, rule recording. And I think also that these social rules are they're not written, they're unwritten, hidden expectations, but they've been formulated by the mass, right? The majority, because it's what makes them feel the most comfortable. And I also think the other thing that challenges neurodiverse people, but even neurotypical people, is often that conversation, that question of, hi, how are you? I'm good, thanks, how are you? When the exchange is purely just that, right? It's just the exchange. There might not be truth there. And so in our everyday communications and conversations, people aren't necessarily telling the truth, right? They're lying all the time.
All the time.
All the time they're lying. And so for a neurodivergent brain who's trying to learn those hidden rules through observation more than anything, because it's hardly ever done explicitly, if they're learning from people who aren't even telling the truth, how are they ever going to get it right? And that's happening hundreds and thousands of times over and over again in the same day, when really all that's happening is it's just these everyday pleasantries.
Yeah.
There's not necessarily any depth or meaning beneath it.
When you think about reading the room, so you've got to notice people's tone, their moods, their body language, facial expressions, timing, group dynamics, sarcasm, which is one of my favorite.
Yep.
And whether something is appropriate, but at that moment or not. So there's some things that are appropriate at some times and not at others. And how do you explain that?
Yep.
And there's an intricacy to all these things that is just incredible. And it's hard to catalog all these things. Like the invisible amount of processing that the neurodiverse brain must do in those situations must be enormous, which is why I know with social situations, they last a very short amount of time before you get overstimulated and you need to leave.
Yeah.
Do you find that same thing as well?
Absolutely. And because it's not just those unwritten rules or the need to read a room that you're processing, because it's all the other things that we talk about as well. It's all of the other sensory inputs or where your capacity within yourself is at that point in the day, what's led up to that. So how much capacity do you have to even be able to read the data? The reading the room is only one tiny piece of what the neurodivergent brain is needing to do in that moment.
It's like a hidden set of social rules, right? Let's look at some hidden social rules. I've got a list, okay?
Yep.
So do not talk for too long, but also do not say too little.
Yeah.
Make eye contact, but not too much.
Yep.
Join in, but don't interrupt. Be honest, but not too honest. Ask questions, but not the wrong kind. Be funny, but not at the wrong time. Notice when someone is bored, annoyed, joking, embarrassed, or trying to leave. Know when a "how are you" is real and when it is just social wallpaper. I mean, we could have a list of those all day.
Yeah.
Right? And how do you explain those?
Yeah.
I still don't.
No.
Our son's 17. I'm still explaining the intricacies of every single thing.
Yeah.
So the question is, who decides these rules? Us as a society?
Yeah.
Yes. And do we have different sets of rules for different people? Or why are all the rules so inconsistent? Like, why are the rules different at home versus the rules are different in a social situation versus at school? And how do we explain those intricacies? That's what makes it so challenging, right?
Yep, exactly. When you ask the question, who decides the rules, it takes me to my favorite strategy of asking, is this true? Is it real? Does it exist? Because we're making the assumptions that these social rules are truths, that they're set in stone, that everybody knows them, that everybody understands them and abides by them, but they're not. They're just these kind of random, I guess, social agreements, right?
Yeah.
And as I said before, they're created by the majority because it makes most people feel comfortable. That's really what it's about. It's about people feeling comfortable because people don't like to feel uncomfortable. And so, yeah, they're shaped by those cultural norms. They're shaped by, as you say, schools, workplaces, supermarkets. I mean, a great social rule is lining up at the cash register at the supermarket. When do I start putting my groceries on there? Do I talk to the person in front of me? Do I talk to the cashier? When do I hand my shopping bags over for the person working there to put my groceries into? When do I scan my Woolies everyday rewards card? Like, it's about getting all of these things right. What side of the aisle do I go down? Queuing up. There's all these social expectations.
How far back do I stand at an ATM?
Right. Exactly.
You know, one of my favorite stories, and it happened so many times when our son was younger. We were out, I was with my mother-in-law, my son, and we were walking down the main strip of shops. And there was another older woman who we knew who we ran into. And she just got her new outfit on and was very happy with the way she looked. And she asked our son, "Oh, how do you look?" And what he said wasn't very flattering. And at that moment, I remember thinking, oh gosh, she doesn't probably know that he's neurodiverse and that's something that he says. But she laughed. She thought it was hilarious. And the number of times that has happened since where someone will ask him something and he'll just say, I'll ask him, "Oh, what do you think?" He goes, "Dad, that looks terrible."
Yeah.
I find hilarious. But over time, we've now taught him that in those situations, you don't really want to tell the truth. But Dad, I don't want to lie.
Yeah.
So that's fine. You don't have to lie, but just sort of try and find something that you can say positive about them. So he'll often say things like, "Oh, I'm glad you're really happy about what you're wearing." Do you know what I mean? Which he's really happy with. It suits the rule. Yeah. But I know that I look terrible to him. So just little things like that.
I have this similar thing with my mum if we go shopping together, and she might, pick up an outfit and say, "Oh, do you like this?" And instead of saying I don't like it, I say, "Oh, for you," because she obviously likes it. So for you, sure. For me, no. So I'm not completely saying that I don't like it, just not for me.
And do you do like safe space talking? So what I mean is, so home is a safe space. often people with autism will have very strong interests in something, and our son is no different in that instance. And he will want to come over and I'll call it dump.
Yeah.
And dump a whole bunch of knowledge on you. So he can literally speak to you, or some people would say at you, for 15 minutes nonstop. Now, for me, I've decided as a rule that I will stop what I'm doing unless I cannot stop, which is very rare. I will stop and let him absolutely dump, because he can now knows that if he can stop me anytime, he can just dump, because that's good for him, right?
Yeah.
It allows him to regulate, allows him to get everything he needs out. It's safe. I'm never going to tell him off. But at school, that was an issue. So if there's a group of friends who are talking about something, he'll jump in with a topic, and just if he does that same thing in the group, they don't want to hang around with him anymore. And so it was hard to explain that you need to, as part of a conversation, you need to not only give, but you need to receive as well. And listening is just as important skill as speaking. And that's a really hard skill to teach, because, if you're really knowledgeable on a topic, you want to be able to say a whole lot on it. And that shows that you're really interested and all that sort of thing. But in a social situation, people don't like one person controlling the conversation. Yeah. And if he goes somewhere with an adult and one adult's just doing all the talking, you walk away and goes, gosh, could he have stopped?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Or because there's a lot of rule following, I think this is where it's tricky, right? Because there are these social rules that are hidden, but a lot of neurodivergent people want to follow rules quite rigidly. And that's how they feel like they can fit into the world, is these are the rules that I've understood and this is how I follow them. But then if the people around them aren't following those rules, they then want to say, well, no, that's wrong. And then by doing that, they're breaking the hidden social rule that they don't know. I had a great example this week. Have been running the before and after school care as a temporary measure at our school at the moment. So I have a wide variety of ages in a classroom. And it's really fascinating to see how those different ages interact, because even though there's neurodiversity within the space, there's also not neurodiversity. And then you have these varying ages. So you can see where rules have been learnt and not learnt. But then also you can see where the neurodiversity comes in and that rule hits its limit.
Yeah.
And not being able to read that 4 or 5-year-old, it's okay to not hold them to as high a rule standard as I might a 9-year-old when the stakes are low, right? We're not talking about anything that's dangerous. But if a 4-year-old thinks that all sharks are grey, it's okay for the 4-year-old to think that, because they have such a smaller view on the world. But someone that's slightly older, but maybe neurodivergent, goes, well, no, that's not true. Not all sharks are grey. And it makes for a very challenging community.
I have a student in the classroom who is neurodiverse, and put it into context, we're often at the back of the classroom. And so we can see every other student. And lots of other students break little rules. Like if the teachers ask them to be quiet and the teacher turns around, then they'll whisper to each other. And so the student that I'm with will often say, hey, what are you doing? You're breaking the rules. And it's hard to explain to them that it's not our responsibility to enforce those rules. And by the same token, a small whisper about their work is an okay way to talk, even though they've been told not to talk. And how do you write those rules up? It's very, very difficult to understand. The classroom's a really difficult place, Students are expected to know things like when to stop talking, when to join in,
Yep.
when to laugh, when to be quiet,
Yep.
when the teacher is serious, when the teacher's joking. I mean, sarcasm in a classroom, teachers do it all the time. But some students don't get it. And I understand that. Like when their peers are joking, how do they know? I know that some of my neurodiverse students don't understand that, and it's really difficult to teach it and to watch it. It's hard because the students that are neurodivergent can be punished for not reading the room, but in no time in history has everyone explained what reading the room is. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Often what looks like, being rude, being blunt, over talking or silence, awkwardness. It can be something as simple as confusion, right? The classroom is a very, very difficult place.
Very difficult. And I think there needs to be when we communicate as adults, particularly with younger children or students, there needs to be some level of explicit communication. I'm not going to say teaching, but I think rather than constantly telling a student to stop interrupting, what we're not doing, if you just keep saying, stop calling out, stop interrupting, stop. What we're not doing is explicitly explaining what the expectation is. And so I think saying, right now we're listening, and in X number of minutes, or when I finish this section, I'm going to ask you to put your hands up, and then I'm going to ask you to share your thoughts. And that provides some structure and some framework around what the expectation is. I used to, when I was teaching childbirth education and postnatal support, we talked a lot about how the brain processes language and how things are communicated, particularly to children. And I would often say, you need to be communicating during birth and labor. You need to be communicating clearly and using explicit language. But then also with your children, you need to be doing the same thing, because if you use the words don't and not all the time, the brain doesn't always process it, but it's also not providing them with a structure to understand what they should be doing or what something should be used for. And the analogy I always used was, if you say to your child, stop jumping on the couch, they're not hearing what they should be doing. They're just hearing jumping on the couch, which is what they're doing. But if we say the couch is for sitting on, if you would like to jump, let's go out and jump on the trampoline, or let's go and jump off the back step, or whatever it might be. Explain what the environment is for, explain what the tools are for, but also identify the behavior or the movement or whatever it might be that they're seeking, and show them where that is appropriate. So there needs to be some level of explicitity, because otherwise...
Well, we're punishing kids for things that they've been taught, right?
Exactly.
But how do we teach it?
Well, we have to learn it ourselves. We can't be placing the burden upon just parents and just teachers. I think as a society, we have to change how we communicate. We need to stop not lying, but a level of honesty with kindness is important. My husband uses this term all the time. You've got to be kind, not nice. Kindness over niceness. Niceness might make that person feel good in the moment, but kindness is showing them the right path. Even if there's an element of uncomfortability, they will benefit in the long run. Niceness is in the moment. It's short-lived. How that happens, I don't know, but maybe through this podcast and,
Well, that's the number one rule in our house, is be kind.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. The environment of having to read a room needs to be removed, but the expectation that neurodivergent people have to act and behave and conduct themselves in a neurotypical way, we have to remove that completely, because inclusion has to come from flexibility on both sides. And if we're just constantly placing the burden of meeting hidden expectations and reading rooms on the neurodivergent community, then the only people that are benefiting from that are the neurotypical, and it's at a really high cost for the neurodivergent community.
So some of the questions that we used to get asked, and still do, by our son, is things like, why did they say that? What did that mean? Was that a joke? Are they angry at me? Why did everyone laugh? And one of my favorites is, was what I said funny? Which means that sometimes our son will say something and it's hilarious, but he doesn't understand why it's hilarious.
Yeah. And
so he might reuse it, but not understand why. Yeah. And so we're trying to explain those sorts of things. Do you have those sort of questions?
Yeah, we get the "are you mad at me" a lot, because when capacity is low, the reading of tone and facial expressions is inhibited. So trying to gauge the temperature of somebody else's emotions is a really big one. And the "are you laughing at me or with me?"
Yeah. Yeah.
That is a really challenging one. And because my kids are hilarious, they are so funny and witty. So very often we're laughing with them.
Yes.
But yeah, I think,
How do you know if you can't read the cues, right?
well, that's it. And if you've spent your life feeling like you're constantly being corrected
Or laughed at.
Exactly,
Yep.
laughed at, then you lose confidence
Absolutely.
in that part of your personality or your judgment.
Yeah. It almost works both ways. So with the anger thing, sometimes my son will ask me, "Oh, you sound angry. Are you angry?" And I'll say no. And it might be a case of I was in the middle of doing something else. So my brain was only half into the question and I was sort of doing both things. So I wasn't concentrating on my tone so much. But it also works in reverse because he will say things that to my ears sound really harsh and firm. And so I will have to ask him, mate, were you angry at me? Are you feeling in a particular way? He'll say, no, I'm not. And I'll have to explain, well, using that particular tone sends the signal to society, which is one of the big problems, is that I'm expecting him to sound how my neurotypical brain thinks he should sound, whereas he should be able to sound however he wants, and I should be able to read him. So while he can't read the room, it's only the neurotypical room that he can't read.
Yes.
Right? All his friends, well, a lot of his friends are neurodiverse. He has no problem reading that room at all.
Yeah.
When who has a problem in that room? Me.
Yes.
So it's a case of we need to both find some sort of bridge between those two rooms so we can all read each other's rooms, right? It's just another language that we have to learn to speak.
And as your children get older, and I know you're facing this reality as both of your kids are in their teens, and then I also have a sibling and a sister-in-law that I care for that are neurodiverse that are well into adulthood. We're sending them out into the world. And so, when your kids are little, you've got the opportunity to keep them safe in a much easier way because you're around, you're there all the time. But as they get older or turn into adults, you're not always there. And we want that. We want our people to have autonomy and independence and live purposeful, fulfilling lives, but not at the risk of their safety. And we have a lot of experience and incidents with my adult people that I care for where they haven't been safe or they have been taken advantage of or they've made maybe questionable decisions and not questionable decisions, but they've made decisions or said things that have put them at risk in the wider society. And so the challenge of wanting to teach our kids how to not read a room, but how to be safe in environments is a scary one because there are times where that's not going to happen.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, our son is 17 now, so year 11. So he'll do year 12 next year. And after that, we're not sure. We're not sure what's next.
Yeah.
And, his whole life we've been able to protect him, which wasn't possible at school. So, you can put as much safety around your child as you can. Like before the school, we'd have, these are what's happening at school today. We'd have little cards on his bag so we could see what's going to happen. We'd prepare him for the whole day, give him all the right stuff in his lunchbox. All these books and textbooks were all color-coded and everything planned to the nth degree. But once he got in the school ground, we had no control.
Yep.
And I know now, I'm working in schools that not every teacher or staff member is equipped to be able to deal with what comes up in that day. And I can now only imagine the hardship that he had at school. And I see it in other students. And I see that, I could almost wish that their parents could have a little camera on my shoulder to see how hard their days are. Like the amount of energy, when you talk about reading a room, it's perpetually reading a room. It's reading corridors, it's reading rooms, it's reading lunchtimes. And some kids are going through a situation I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy.
Yeah.
Like they're just in tears. They're finding everything so difficult. You can tell they just want to crawl up into a ball in a corner and disappear,
Yeah.
which is really hard.
Yeah.
And we can say that our education system is failing those kids, which it is. And we can suggest they go to this school or that school, but for a lot of those kids, there is no school for them at the moment. Like I know there's lots of kids who come to my school for that particular reason. They don't fit where they are.
Same.
My school's a mainstream government school, but we're very neuro inclusive. So we have a lot of kids who have fallen through the cracks in other schools, come to our school. And if they don't flourish at our school, they'll either move to a different school or their parents might homeschool them, whatever. Which is a decision that we made, which is the best decision we ever made, was to pull our son out of mainstream school and does school from home, which he thrives. As you can see, he's a different kid. So I've got some questions for you, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Okay. So what does it actually feel like internally when you're trying to read a room?
I think the best analogy I can give is that, the duck's feet underwater. That's what it feels like. You're just constantly paddling, but just trying to stay neutral and calm on the outside. 'Cause you don't want other people to see the cogs turning, so to speak. It's using energy, a lot of capacity.
As a neurotypical person, I mean, the way I read a room has changed over the years. When I was younger, I probably felt a little bit more intimidated by the room. So you'd walk into a room and you'd look around it and try and gauge who was who and what was what before you went in and made yourself known. But these days, being older, I don't care. I walk into a room and I just deal with it as it is. And I think that's probably an age thing. But that's because I'm not having to worry about reading the room. It just comes naturally. And so, I wonder, for someone who's neurodiverse, do you feel like you're guessing the whole time?
All the time, constantly guessing.
And how do you know when you're right?
Well, you don't. Like that. I guess that's the thing. You don't know that you're right. And even if you are right, you're going to second guess what you've done. So I'm often walking away from situations and reliving them and replaying them over in my mind. Did that happen the way that I thought it happened? Did what I say land the way I wanted it to land? Or crap, that didn't land. I know for a fact that didn't land, and now I'm going to relive that for the next 20 years of my life.
Is it all like scanning for danger?
All the time. Yeah. You have this hypervigilance about you. And again, my experience is that I've lived a life as being undiagnosed. So I'm, for the most part, have lived my life thinking that I'm neurotypical and not being neurotypical. And my experience of walking into a room, in comparison to what you just shared, is almost the complete opposite. Because I feel like as a child and a teen, I would have been considered quite extroverted, whereas I think I was just unmasked neurodivergent and I was just being my true authentic self. And then as I've gone through life and hit adulthood and started to go, oh, okay, I'm, in these spaces, I'm not meeting the bar of what I should be. And I've learnt to mask, and the masking has gotten larger and more intense. And so I would now be considered in a large space as more of an introvert. I would describe myself as more of an introvert. When I know people and I'm comfortable, or I'm around like-minded neurotypical people, whether I know that or not, I'm my more authentic self.
Did diagnosis make you more aware of those issues, and as a result, it's extra processing?
I think it's twofold. Partly, yes, my own diagnosis, but also then my children's diagnosis, because as a parent, you're also reading rooms for your kids or reading spaces to make them accessible and safe for your kids. So it's compounding in that sense. So for like from a sensory perspective, I'm more aware of those sorts of impacts on myself and others. maybe there's an element of second guessing. How do I navigate this world as a neurodivergent person? Yeah, I'm a chronic oversharer. I've learnt this about myself, and I feel like I've always been a chronic oversharer. And in the past, maybe I just haven't really cared. I just thought that was how I connected with people, and I think it is how I connect with people.
I've never noticed it. Honestly, I have not never noticed it.
Okay, so I'll give you an example of a time that I think I read the room wrong. I overshared. That I still
Yes.
So and you were there, right?
Okay.
So we were in class in our own class learning, and we were talking about self-care and what people do for self-care. This conversation happened later in the day, so we'd been in class for many hours. My capacity was low. My Ritalin had probably run out by that stage. And the question was asked of the class, what does everybody do for self-care? And I immediately took myself off mute and just went, therapy. And then went, oh crap, like, I don't think that was what was being asked. And I put myself back on mute, and I felt myself go red. I felt my heart rate increase. I was like, oh, wow, I've completely overshared. I've completely misread the vulnerability or the honesty of this, because all of the other things that were being shared were like, oh, have a massage, or I get my nails done.
Let me put your mind at ease. I have no recollection of that whatsoever.
That's hilarious.
Literally none.
Yeah.
I can't even remember the question.
Yeah.
Don't even know what I said if I gave a response at all.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it. And I'm sure I can tell just by looking at you. This is me reading you.
I still don't believe you.
No. I can see that you replay that in your brain a bit, right?
All the time.
I promise you, no one knows anything about it.
Because that gets stored, right? That feeling and emotion gets stored in my body, my brain. I feel like in a physical way where I can go back to that to make a determination on future conversations. We were having, slightly unrelated, but we were having a conversation with your son earlier about card games, and you were asking him about a particular card game that you've played with some family members.
Yes.
And he said, I remember every single card game we've ever played, every time we've ever played a card game, and I don't know what you're talking about, right? Because he stores all of those memories within him as a catalogue of reference.
It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
It is. It blows my mind.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest things that you notice is, when you can sort of, this sounds really bad as a parent to say this, right? But you can lie to your kids, right? Yeah. You can spin a little bit of truth and get away with a few things. And especially when you know, oh God, I stuffed that up. I forgot that, or I've done this. And you go, oh, blah, 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 blah. But no, with him, he can literally quote me word for word about what I said, and there's no comeback.
Yeah.
So I know to him, there's no point in trying to spin any sort of nonsense.
Yeah.
Because he's got me covered every time, which is great. It means that as a result, I'm pretty truthful with them all, unless one of them might ask me what they're wearing, and I say I love it. Having said that, I do love what they wear. Are you consciously tracking things like tone, words, posture, pace, pauses, all those sorts of things?
All of it.
So that's one of the many reasons why social situations are so exhausting for people with autism.
Yep.
People with neurodiversity. Because we've always done social situations minimalistic. So we go somewhere and we can tell when our son's done. In fact, these days he's old enough where he says, oh, no, I'm not going.
Yeah.
Unless it's really important, he won't go. And we're totally okay with that. Yeah. And I think every parent who has a neurodiverse child needs to understand that's just going to be too much.
Yeah.
And so you've got to pick your battles, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you rather have them at the social situation for half an hour and then have the rest of the day be not great? Or would you rather have them at home and you get to play cards for an hour and have a great time, or a laugh, or whatever, you know?
Yeah. And I think being honest with the people around you about what affects you and what doesn't affect you and what you can manage and what you can't manage is really important. My daughter received a birthday invitation last night for a friend, and it's been really nice to see the progression of how these invitations are being communicated, because sometimes she's not able to go at all. That decision has to be hers. It has to still send the invite, even if there's a high chance that the person is going to turn it down. They still want to be included.
I'm with you 100%. As a parent of a neurodiverse child, just getting the invitation is huge. So always send the invitation.
Always send it.
Yeah.
But sleeping over at other people's houses is really not her cup of tea. In fact, it's not even that it's not her cup of tea. It's just not something she can do, right? She needs to be in her own bed, her own space, have consistency and no surprises and all of that. So to receive an invitation that says, hey, we're going to go and do these 2 things, and then we're going to have a sleepover, and we understand if she doesn't want to join for the sleepover, but we'd love to see her for the other activities, meant that I didn't have to explain myself in my reply either. That the invitation is important. The acknowledgement and acceptance of what somebody is capable and able of doing is important. And not having to explain why she can't come for a sleepover is a weight off my shoulders. And I was just able to reply and say, amazing, thanks for the invite. We'll be there for roller skating and dinner.
Yeah, brilliant.
Done.
Yeah.
So just communicating explicitly, openly, with acceptance and inclusion will make a huge difference to not having to, it's slightly off the topic of reading the room, but you're almost preemptively reading rooms in those sorts of social
the last thing you want to do is to get somewhere and go up to the people who are running whatever and say, look, because I don't know about you, but we always got to things, we're always there first if we could be, always early.
Yeah.
So the least number of people there so that we could get him in the space, be comfortable. And then when more people arrive, we probably leave because it's too much. Often we'd get there well early or just ridiculously early so that we could be part of it, so that we've done the right thing.
Yeah.
It's right for him. And then we'd leave. But having to get somewhere and explain all these things every single time puts a lot of load on parents. And if the parents who've made the invitation don't understand your situation, then they can often be like, why would you leave? Like, not very understanding. So it's great that you've got that relationship.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's really nice.
I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
So, when your children are going through primary school and they're trying to find their friends, and with our son, it was difficult. He had friends, but they weren't overly social, and he wasn't always the most comfortable in a social situation, and he'd do things that would make others feel uncomfortable. And when you're young in primary school, it's somewhat accepted because everyone's still learning these social rules. But as you get older, kids understand the rules more. And I say the rules in inverted commas because there are no written rules anywhere, but they become less understanding of people who don't read the room and don't understand the social rules. So we've always had a policy with our son that if something happens, come and talk to us, and we'll try and talk about it as much as we can. And when I say talk about it as much as we can, I don't mean we are going to just talk nonsense for 60 minutes. I mean, we're trying to come at it from as many different angles as we can to try and cover off as much diversity of that one situation as possible. So, for example, when I'm speaking to you and you say something that I think you're being sarcastic, so I laugh and you give me this shock face of, oh my gosh, why would you laugh at that? That's horrible. And then I feel terrible. And so we're trying to explain how, all the things that could lead up to that, all the types of not just body language, but what was the conversation prior to that? What were you talking about just before that? And would that lead into a joke? Would that lead into something serious? So that there's not just this one little item that he's got in his catalog, but sort of like a roadmap that gets you there. And I think as a parent, the most important thing you can do is to have that open door policy with your child and say, look, if any of these things happen, please let's talk about them. Let's talk about everything around it so that we can try and understand. And if you have questions, ask them, because kids, adults as well, have what if questions all day long. But can you imagine the what if questions if you've only got a single definition for each thing? Like for me, my dictionary of social situations, is only this big,
Mm.
so it doesn't really work on audio, but not very big.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're talking about having to catalog every single thing, a neurodiverse person's is 500 times bigger. Like it's almost infinite because there's so many different situations that can happen in every situation, right?
Yep. Yep.
So that's my biggest thing for parents is to make sure that your child can ask you, and if they're younger and something happens like that, explain why it happens, explain all the different things. You've got to look at it from all different angles and try and explain why something like that can happen, and explain that it's not going to happen that exact same way, but these things could happen, and you're not going to hit the mark. You're never going to hit that. You're never going to get that exact same situation ever again. But you're trying to give your child like an encyclopedia that they can look up in their brain and go, okay, that happened, this happened. Let's try this.
Yeah. And I think social success, or understanding that social success looks different to everybody, is a very difficult lesson to learn, and not one that children or even teenagers or young adults learn. It's something, what did we say before? Wisdom comes with age, right? Like finding your people, and the people that get you and the people that understand you and support you and cheer for you. Not everybody's going to be that. Not everybody's going to like you. And you're not going to like everyone. And that is a conversation. It's not something you want to immediately think of as a conversation you're going to have with your child. But it's okay to say, hey, you don't have to be friends with everybody, and not everybody has to be friends with you. We do need to be kind and respectful and treat people with compassion and empathy and equity and fairness and all of those things, but they don't have to be your friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you find, that, and that is a conversation that I have a lot with my children, one in particular, where it's okay. It's okay that you don't like that person. There's people I don't like either. And as you get older, you find yourself in spaces where that happens potentially less and less, right? Because kindergartens and schools are usually a consequence of geographical location with some privilege thrown in. But life looks really different, and you can orchestrate that to a certain extent as you move forward. So sometimes it's just about navigating those spaces as safely as possible and not hinging your identity to them. Something I did here this week, we had an inclusion group come and present to the kids in our school, so foundation to year twos, and it was about inclusion and people with disabilities and how do we make spaces accessible, and helping young children understand that how they access spaces or activities might be different for other people than it is for them. And one of the statistics that they mentioned was that there's 1.6 billion people in this world that have a disability. And I would say there's probably more, because there's a lot of people with hidden disabilities or undiagnosed disabilities, but that's a lot of people. So if we go off the 1.6 rule, then in a room of 10 people, there's going to be one or two at least that have a disability. So in a room of 100 people, there's even more. So if we're expecting those people to be reading these unwritten rules in spaces that are already inaccessible for them, it's going to make that social cohesion impossible.
It makes classrooms very difficult. And also, as an ES, an education support worker, I get access to be able to look at the students' profiles. So I know, what student needs what sort of support. But some teachers don't also take those profiles into account when teaching the room. So those students they must sit there feeling left out. So that means that also when I'm in the room, I have particular students that I genuinely look after, but I also go around and make sure the students understand what the teacher said, because in some classrooms, students are scared to ask the teacher for help because they're intimidated by them for whatever reason, but not intimidated by me, which is good. So, it's about having it worked both ways. So one of the big things I think is important for our neurodiverse kids is to be able to teach them phrases they can use when they're unsure of a situation. And so some of the ones I thought were like, are you joking? So our son sometimes asks us, are you joking? Or were you being sarcastic? And often he can now get the sarcastic cue, which makes me so happy.
Yeah.
And as we've discussed, I'll often deliberately say sarcastic things just so he learns sarcasm. Things like, did I miss something? What did you mean by that? Can you say that another way? So those questions, especially in your house, if you teach your child to be able to ask those questions so that they can get an understanding of what you meant, because there's so many things that we say in a day that just make no sense.
Yeah.
No sense. Oh, can you come and help me, Dad? Yeah, I'll be there in a sec. Well, no one's ever been 1 second to help, right? Not in the history of the world, I would suggest that's ever happened. So that can be confusing. And I'll be there in a minute. Same thing. I'm never there in a minute.
No. I get pulled up on that one all the time.
Often people with neurodiversity take things literally. So I thought we could look at some of the most commonly used phrases that when taken literally are ridiculous.
Yep.
Break a leg, which means good luck, obviously, but when taken literally, not quite as happy. It's raining cats and dogs,
Yep.
which means it's very heavy rain. Hold your horses, which just means wait or slow down. Bite the bullet, which means face a difficult situation. Spill the beans. Reveal a secret. It's a piece of cake, which is something that is very easy. It's time to hit the sack, which means go to bed. Don't let the cat out of the bag, which means reveal a secret accidentally. Pulling someone's leg is teasing or joking. And burn the midnight oil, which means to stay up late working. So there's a whole range of things like, I can eat a horse. The ball's in your court. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That's the last straw. Keep an eye on it. We could go all day. None of these things, if taken literally, it's ridiculous, right? So having to explain all of these.
Yeah, clear as mud. That was one I used with my daughter. And she's like, that doesn't make sense, Mum. Mud isn't clear. I'm like, that's the point. There's another really funny one is, when you're watching streaming services and you're binging something, as we tend to do, speaking of self-care, and then it brings up a little thing, are you still there? And you say, yes, I'm still here. I'm still binging. We use Waze for our GPS system. And if there's a hazard on the road or whatever, it will ask you as a driver, is it still there? And our daughter thought it was like Netflix. So every time Waze would ask us, is it still there? She would go, yes, we're still here. We're still here. And we'd be like, no, that's not what it's asking you. But it's same question, two completely different contexts.
Yeah. Reading the room is not simple. A lot of people are being asked to follow rules they were never clearly shown. The answer is not shame. The answer is making the invisible more visible. The question I would like to ask you is, what is one social cue you wish had been explained to you earlier? If you want to let us know in comments below or on socials, that would be amazing. Thanks, Em.
Thanks, Dave. Over and out.